Okay, now, also we got to understand, when money is created in loans, money is created when loans are issued and debts incurred. Money is extinguished when loans are repaid. Now you got to understand that, because if you pay down the debt, you destroy the money supply. We already have way more debt than the money supply, so if we got rid of, according to the Federal Reserve Bank, $7.7 trillion worth of debt, we'd have, what? $51 trillion of debt and no money, period. And again, the Treasury told me that. I mean, that's where I got it. Okay, the money, the principal money no longer exists, just like it didn't exist before the loan was made. The bank don't loan you anybody's money, and it don't loan you money they have. It loans you money they create the moment you sign the promise to pay, and they put the numbers in your checking account and on their books. And when that loan is repaid, all that goes away. All you have left is zero. You have zero in your checking account, zero that. But you have to pay them interest, which then doesn't go to the loan principal. That's distinguished. But the interest goes into the banker's income account, and they may not call it exactly that, but that's what it is. And it lives on as somebody else's loan principal. That money is not extinguished. It's still out there. Somebody else owes it all, and the banker has it. Now we get to the solution part, because I'm a great person that believes that if you're going to complain, you ought to be able to tell them how to do it better. And most of us don't do that, but I'm really into that. So to do this, if we're going to solve anything, and if we're going to take our country back, the first thing we have to do is take the power to control the money away from those people who have it and give it back to the people who have it. Now we have a plan to do that. In fact, we have two plans. My personal opinion, this should be done at the federal level. But from personal experience, that's a tough thing. I found it's a little easier to do the exact same thing by starting at the state level. And that's where I'm working on. And until we do this, we're not going to ever recover our country. We're never going to regain our rights or our freedoms, as guaranteed us, given to us by our Maker, our Creator. We're not going to have that, because I guarantee you, if you have $7 trillion of debt drawing interest and you get most of it, who do you really think controls everything? Now all money is created as bank credit. It is not true money, because it is all based on interest-bearing debt. Can you actually borrow from me to pay you and get out of debt? You're still in debt. Even though you paid off that debt, you're still in debt. And that's what happens when money represents debt. True money should always represent wealth produced by somebody and put into circulation as a payment for that production in a way that benefits everyone. Now, we can't all create our own money. That wouldn't work, that's obvious. If we did, it would not work. We just create money to live. But then we couldn't go out and buy anything, because they wouldn't be working either. They'd create their own money and everything would go ahead. Well, you see, that's pretty logical, isn't it? Okay, now our Constitution, federal Constitution, and this is where I got the idea from, says that the federal Congress should coin the money, and that's a verb, so it actually means create, not use metal money. They should create the money, and then it also says down below that they should also provide us post offices and post roads. So if the federal government, and that's the way it should be done, we're going to try and run around that, they should create the money and spend it into circulation with no debt to anybody to build our basic infrastructure. Now we have a tremendous road system and money in circulation. We don't owe anybody a thing, and we don't have to be taxed for it either. Can you beat that? That's how it should work. If our founding fathers would have understood, truly understood the principles of a money system, that's the way the system would work today. Because you can do barter, you can do business without money. I could trade my suit coat for your shirt, and we wouldn't have any debt, and we'd make a deal with it. But if there's no transportation, if I can't get to you to trade, we can't do any commerce, can we? So the most basic thing to commerce is transportation facilities. So what we're going to do, and this is how it's going to be done, and this is the way we're going to do it at the state level. And this is my conception, not saying it can't be changed, but this bill has been introduced in Minnesota several years, but this last year it was done in 2009, and it went in as House File 888, Senate File 705, and you can find this on the website anytime you want, going to www.leg.state.mn.us/leg. I hope you can read that. If not, tell me afterwards and you can get it. And for just purposes, we called it the Minnesota Transportation Act. It's a simple process because most people don't understand it, but we have a dual banking system in the United States. We have a state chartered banking system that's ran and regulated by the state. We have a federal banking system that most of us know all about. The Federal Reserve banking system that's regulated by the Fed and created by the federal government. But they're two separate entities. In fact, we just had a hearing in Minnesota that the chairman of the Senate Bank Committee called about investigating and talking a little bit to the bankers and the regulators. And you know, the FDIC was invited, and the commercial bankers were invited, and the Banking Commission was invited, but you know, the Fed was invited because they didn't have nothing to do with it. And it was clear by sitting and listening to that meeting, the state legislators can put any regulation they so desire on the state banks. The only federal agency that audits a state bank is the FDIC, Federal Insurance Depository Corporation. And the only reason they do that, at least in Minnesota, several years ago they passed a law that said all state banks had to have FDIC insurance, so therefore when you bring in those, you bring in the regulations. The MTA, Minnesota Transportation Act, could be anything, could be Idaho, Arizona, is a new and innovative way to address the funding shortfall and to provide safe and sound funding for Minnesota's roads, bridges, without increasing the tax burden. The MTA will ensure a more safe and sound Minnesota state banking system. And the MTA will do this by enhancing the current banking practice of creating money as an investment. Banks can expand our money supply by making loans and investments. The story of banks, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York City. And they do that basically by investing in some sort of security, you know, government bonds, state bonds, you know, whatever. Banks can expand their money supply, and I repeated that. Now, this is a personal email that I got from Rodney Heck, who works for the FDIC in Washington, D.C. And first, I had the state revisor's office tell me, even if you pass this bill, the FDIC wouldn't let you do it. And I said, well, what would they let me do? What do they do? What do they let me do? He said, I don't have a clue. Well, if you don't know what they do, how would you know what they wouldn't do? What they wouldn't let us do? So that got me thinking, so I went home and I got on the phone and I worked around until I got an email for this, or a telephone guy for this, and I called him and ended up with Rodney Heck down there. And we got this conversation, and then I didn't have it writing. I went down and told the legislators they wouldn't believe me, so I had to figure out how to get it writing. Thank goodness I married a pretty bright lady, and she said, well, just do like we do down in the office, send him an email and ask him to confirm the conversation. So that sounds like an excellent idea, so I wrote in this email. I want to thank you for taking time to visit with me yesterday, afternoon 1/24:05, and send you this following up memo to confirm that I understand our conversation correctly. When I asked, could a bank create money as investments as well as a loan? And if so, what could the bank invest in? You replied, this is a hard question to answer. It depends on whether it was a federal bank or a state bank, and he also maybe on how big the bank would be. I said, if it was a state bank, what would be the controlling factors? And you replied, then the state law would be the control, and that would control the FDIC audit. And I said, please confirm or correct so that I can be sure I understood our conversation correctly. Thank you for your time. He writes back, in your message dated 1/31/2005, 10:19 a.m., Central Standard Time. Dear sir, that was information I provided to you by our subject matter experts, and in turn, which I provided to you. I'd say that was a fairly good source.